God can minister to you. Y'all ready? Let's go. If we can hang this text around the topic, preach until you silence your enemy. Preach until you silence your enemy. If we will admit the truth and deal with reality for a few moments, most believers are trying to wage this war, this storm, this fight in silence, while your enemy, the devil, is crying aloud. Most of us, because of pride and formality, we will not admit that we are allowing the enemy to win because we haven't yet realized or actualized our authority, yet alone the spiritual gifting that has been invested in our lives. Even before you knew you, God already planned, destined, and willed that you would win. The tragedy of the believer isn't that we fall down. Isn't that we come short of the glory of God. Isn't that we spend 2.5 hours weekly, Doc, if that with God. Isn't that we sing and preach over our lives, attempting to charge an emotional response. The tragedy of a believer isn't that we have come to accustom to our faith tradition, that we oftentimes lose our fervor, our rigor, and our relevance. But the tragedy is that we never develop our faith posture to the point where we believe God. That's right. That's right. That's right. I knew it would get quiet there. Oh yes, my friends, we sing about it. We shout about it. We teach about it. We preach about it. But when it comes to the implementation of such, we sit quiet while our enemy gets louder. We make claims about it, such as if God said it, that settles it. Yet we refuse to redeem the time. Instead, we spend too much time soliciting the opinions of others, pleading for confirmation, hoping that the prophet will call my name, hoping that the prophet will speak a word into my life when you have 66 books full of the word of God. I don't understand that we fly by night from one conference to the next conference, from one breakthrough to the next breakthrough, and find ourselves still in the same position as we did before the conference even began. We run from one conference to the next when our bedroom is home looking a mess. We run from one conference to the next when you can't even take the time to roll a biscuit. We run from one conference to the next when you can't even take the time to support your own local assembly. I didn't come to beat up on you. I just came to tell you, you ought to preach until you silence your enemy. Yes, my friends, we spend time looking for confirmations and internalizing why this is happening to me. But don't you know that the Bible declares in Hebrews 11:6, but without faith it is impossible to please him. Yes. For he that cometh to God must first believe that he is. Yes. King James Version of the Bible puts a comma there. And if I paid attention long enough in English class, that lets me know that I ought to pause. The word vowel following the comma is a conjunction word in the English language or in English class. And so that simply means that both statements on either side could really be independent. But since they are joined together with a conjunction word, it simply means that the B clause is dependent upon the A clause. And since it was joined together with the word and, the believer first must believe that he is. You have mastered the fact that he is, then you can make the claim that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. I told you that the tragedy of a believer isn't that we don't do anything. It's just the simple fact that we haven't mastered and can do, but we haven't pursued him. And then we get unnerved and get our high horses and think that God isn't answering our prayer. But the Bible says that he would supply my need according to his glory. And if you would supply the glory, then God will supply the need. First, you got to believe that he is. Stop pursuing what you need and start pursuing who God is. Paul makes one bold declaration, one strong argument, and one uncompromising move that puts the enemy to flight. I wonder if anybody listening to me today that will make that same bold declaration. Skimming the 32 years of ministry since you served here, Pastor Pete, I am certain there were some tough decisions to make. Some decisions that went over well, and some that did not go over so well. Some decisions that you made and had to think twice about. Some decisions that may have backfired and never got up off the ground just how you intended them to get up off the ground. I am sure that over these 32 years, there were some moments that were your proudest yet, and others that weren't so proud. Moments where one could have beat his chest, and other moments when one might wanted to hide his face. In this life and span of the ministry years, I am certain that there were times when our sin knew no shame, and time revealed that we were guilty. But you kept on preaching. Oh, just when the decisions that I made were shameful, just when the good I should do, I do not. That which I ought to do, I find myself not doing. Stuck between the tension of right and wrong, swallowed beneath my pride and engaged in my own personal world war. Me, he just kept on preaching. Embarrassed and flushed by my consequence of my actions, my resolve was to give up, to turn back and call it quit. Even though it was on me, I thought for sure that it was finished. Over. The curtain had been pulled. The lighting crew had packed up. And still of the evening, I can still hear him crying. I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes. This reminds me, Karen, of a hill in a faraway land. And on that hill stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. On that hill, hung between two thieves. On that hill, there was mercy and grace. On that hill, pardon was multiplied to me. Connie Holloway, it was on that hill that he decided to stay there. It was on that hill, in my opinion, piece, that he preached his best sermon with few words. It was on that hill, after healing blinded eyes, soothing, calming fears, raising of the dead, feeding 5,000, after speaking to winds and waves. It was after all of that that he preached his best sermon on that hill. He kept right on preaching until his enemy was silent. The sermon was loud and was so clear that even a dying thief who hung beside him could no longer deny the reality, John, that the kingdom had been advanced to him, that the kingdom had come nigh to him. It was on that hill that even a dying thief had to submit unto the leadership of who he was. It was on that hill that he preached his best sermon and used words less as possible. He kept right on preaching, so much so that he received and welcomed this dying thief into the kingdom immediately. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. So peace, just like Jesus, you keep on preaching.